just for it to reach 3,000, which looks like a huge milestone. But by doing so, it will only be setting its foot on the starting line.
Hello, and thanks for joining us today. Today, we are going to take a look at the multi-year deficit in the silver market, market manipulation, and the proposed tariffs. It's great to have Oren Elbaz here with me. He is a sound money advocate and a market analyst that is also known as the Silver Hermit. You can find links to his work on X, YouTube, and Rumble in the description. Oren, welcome back. How's it going today?
Good evening. How do you do?
Oh, doing great. It's great to have you here with me again. Today, we're going to start out with the silver market's deficit. The silver market has been in a deficit for 4 years now, and this has set the stage for there to eventually be a supply issue for physical silver. Today, the stockpile is starting to dwindle in London. It was reported in December that the silver inventory in London fell by 23 million ounces and was near record lows. And this is going on while there is strong industrial demand for silver that has no end in sight. The solar industry, for example, now accounts for 16% of total silver demand, and that's up from just 6% in 2015, just 10 years ago. So the demand is there, but the market is being manipulated. Just as an example, it was reported that the silver market traded 292 million paper ounces yesterday, just yesterday alone. And for comparison, the annual mine supply is about 850 million ounces. Oren, what do you think about the silver deficit going forward? And what do you think about these manipulators? What could they possibly be thinking?
Yes, I'll begin by saying that there was a time in which I was following the futures market more closely, and I was, following the inventory at the warehouses of the COMEX and the LBMA, and I haven't been doing that lately because it feels to me to be a bit pointless. How should I say it? It is beginning to look like a futile exercise because the ability of the manipulators to control the price is obviously so great that I don't think it's really going to change until we get that physical shortage, that shortage that they cannot deal with, that point in which they have to acknowledge that shortage by forcing people to settle their trades in cash. And once that happens, I'm speculating that once that happens, you're going to see a huge jump in the price, if not the official price, then the actual price at your coin store. And then you'll simply know that the game is over. So, what is the point of like following or closely watching that rigged game if you know and you assume that it's going to end one day and you're just waiting for that day? Because as you said, the fundamentals haven't changed. Yeah, the fundamentals are
Right?
still there. There is a continuing deficit in silver. Demand outstrips supply each and every year, has been going on for 4 years in a row. If you look at the ETFs, if you include the ETFs, then it's even 6 years of a deficit, if I recall correctly. And we don't expect that to change unless we do get that recession, and then temporarily we could see a reduction in industrial demand. But again, that won't change the fundamentals of the market. This will just be a temporary thing when industrial demand drops, and then we expect the Federal Reserve to intervene to start printing money again, and then investor demand will return, investor demand will grow, inflation expectations will grow. So it's just the same game. It's the same, the same trick that we've seen over and over again, just like we've seen, for instance, in 2020. I wouldn't be surprised if we see that happening again when the price like drops initially, but then spikes up, starts running. And I think
Sure.
when the price starts running again, I think this will be the time when they really lose control over this market. So I'm not really watching the numbers right now because it's starting to feel kind of futile.
That makes sense. Yeah, keeping an eye on the numbers for a long period of time, I think it can be a little demoralizing. It's almost similar to looking at the price every day, and watching the slams go up and down. So there could be a pullback for a while, but then of course, it sounds like you believe that the demand would come back, and that makes a lot of sense to me. I think with all of the different industries that require silver nowadays, and especially what's been going on with AI recently, there's going to be a lot of demand for silver in computers, CPUs, GPUs, and of course, in the digital age. We probably aren't going to see a time soon where everyone doesn't have a cell phone, where everyone doesn't have their personal computers, and I think that demand is just going to keep growing. And it's interesting too because when you look at what's going on with the LBMA, it looks like China had purchased about 50 million ounces just in November, and so they're draining it. And of course, we have the banksters in the U.S. trying to cover their short positions. Um, so it's pretty interesting. It doesn't make sense that they would want to be cautious and look into covering those short positions because there was a time when Nixon was in office when there was a 10% surcharge on everything coming into the U.S., including the precious metals. So there's a potential there. It could affect them.
Regarding covering their shorts, there's been an interesting tweet by Josh Philip Fair, who's the founder and CEO of Scottsdale Mint. And he tweeted recently that silver refineries in the US are backed up more than 3 months. They are processing so much material into COMEX good delivery bars that industrial consumption is having issues finding reasonably priced physical silver. In other words, what he's saying is that retail investors are giving up, that they are selling their silver back into the market, and that refineries are melting it down, those coins and bars, those small coins and bars, back to those large 1,000 ounce bars, those Comex good delivery bars, in order to replenish the warehouses of the COMEX. Now, I don't think it's going to change the fundamentals. I don't think there's enough silver in the hands of those investors to change what is bound to happen finally, but it could postpone the day.
Hopefully, a lot of people can hang in there, so that all of the private stacks don't just get converted to good delivery bars. That would really be a bummer if the common man isn't able to benefit from this greatly when this market correction takes place.
I have to admit that there were analysts who kept arguing that the public holds huge amounts of silver, and that if we ever get a deficit, the public will answer that deficit by selling its silver back into the market. But um, I was hoping for that to be kind of a negligible phenomenon. I was hoping for the vast majority of investors to hang in there until at least that the price of silver reaches a new all-time high. That hasn't even happened. People are probably pinched. People don't have money, and people are probably forced to sell some of their silver. And I also think that Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies have something to do with it because their price has risen so much and there's such a mania in the crypto market. I'm guessing some investors are just, you know, they're selling their silver perhaps to buy Bitcoin. Again, I think that's a very sad thing because I think we're getting near to that, to that fateful day in which we do have that shortage and, and the game is up. And it feels as though that silver squeeze is so close. It's a very, very sad deal if people are not able to hang in till that day.
It really is. It wouldn't surprise me if you're right that some of them are converting, you know, their profits to cryptos. And I don't know, to me, it seems like a pretty risky time to be doing that. As we've discussed before, I really see them as a speculative investment. It could be not that long if people can hold out. And the reason that I think that is just remember, 70% of the silver that's being mined is not coming from silver primary mines. The price hasn't moved enough yet for the miners to really pick up the slack. Um, and so if people hang in there and aren't selling off their stacks cheap, and in regards to this tariff, a 25% tariff on Mexico and Canada is scheduled to start on February 1st. And we have to keep in mind, Mexico is the largest silver producer in the world, and Canada is a major gold producer. I think they're number four globally. Um, you know, what impact do you think these tariffs could potentially have on silver and gold?
Let's begin by saying that to the best of my knowledge, there should be a 25% tariff on silver imported from Mexico, and that it should translate into an effective 25% increase in the price. And it's incredible that since the election of Donald Trump, the price has not only it has fallen, not only hasn't it risen, but it has actually fallen. A logic dictates
Right?
that the price should rise if the threat of a tariff becomes more real, if it manifests itself. Look, markets should be forward looking. That means that they should have anticipated it in advance, and the price should have risen even before the tariff is implemented. And since it hasn't happened, the only way I can explain it is through some kind of a manipulation. According to I checked the numbers, 44 of all the silver which is imported to the US comes from Mexico. That's like a huge amount. So
Huge impact on this market. Absolutely.
yes, even if that tariff doesn't manifest itself eventually, still only the threat of a tariff should have led to a considerable increase in the price of silver the day after the election, and
Right,
it hasn't
absolutely.
happened.
I think that makes sense that this could be because of manipulation that we didn't see that.
I have no other plausible explanation. If anyone has a better explanation, I would love to hear it. And
Right.
and that brings me to the question you asked me earlier. What do the people who are in charge of that manipulation, what are they thinking? What exactly goes through their heads?
Yeah, how does this play out? How do they think this is going to end?
Well, if I'm trying to guess what's going through their head, I think that they are thinking that they're doing the right thing. Just
They're the
imagine, just put
heroes.
put yourself in their shoes for a second. If they work for a large bank or for the U.S. government, and they must be thinking that they want to protect the dollar and they want to control inflation, and they are concerned that the rising price of gold and silver is um, indicating the amount of inflation, the true amount of inflation, if it's indicating the true expansion of the money supply, then by controlling the price of gold and silver, they can, as though, reduce those inflation expectations and um, give the dollar, extend the life of the US dollar. So, as though for them, this may sound like a good idea, like a good thing to do. So, we think of them as villains. They may be thinking of themselves as heroes. But the thing is that by postponing the inevitable, they are liable to make things much, much worse. Because it, history shows that manipulations can't last forever. Um, by artificially manipulating the price of silver down, for instance, you are increasing, you are disincentivizing production and encouraging consumption. Yes,
Right.
you're
Absolutely.
of course, the miners don't have an incentive to develop new mines and increase the production. And the consumers, the industrial consumers, they don't have an incentive to cut down or to try to uh, reduce the amount of silver that they're using because the price is so cheap, they can use it very liberally. And so, by manipulating the price down, you are creating the shortage, which eventually will end this manipulation because the manipulation can only carry on as long as there's silver to deliver, as long as there's at least the appearance of a normal, healthy delivery mechanism at the COMEX. So I think that if to sum it up, I think they're cutting the branch on which they're standing, on which they're sitting.
That's a good comparison. Absolutely.
Yes, they're sabotaging their own position, but as long as the branch holds on, it appears as though everything is fine. It's only the moment that that branch which they are cutting down, the moment that it breaks, then you realize what a huge mistake it was to undermine it in the first place.
Right, absolutely. And when this correction takes place, it's not going to be a fast recovery. It takes a long time to get a mining operation going. And the people who can hold out, that they I imagine that they're going to be diamond hands at that point, and they're going to be selling off, little by little and just waiting to see how much they can squeeze out of that investment they've made all these years.
I want to tell you something personal.
Okay, you bet.
A couple of nights ago, I had this dream in which I was just looking at the price of silver. In my dream, I was looking at the price of silver and suddenly it started jumping. It started surging, on and on and on. It couldn't stop. It didn't stop. It was this huge, just going up like this vertical line. And of course, it was just a dream, and dreams can sometimes be meaningless. But I do think there is, something prophetic about this specific dream because the market is built in such a way in which if the price ever jumps, it's going to start feeding on itself. I think that this
Right.
is this is what is constantly on my mind. That look, I look at people around me and I look at this speculative mindset that has taken over people and the way they chase every cryptocurrency, every meme coin, every asset that rises, they start chasing it.
Yeah, while it's
Yes.
pumping
Yes.
is when they all want to pile in.
So the
Yeah.
public has been conditioned to chase those assets in order to try to, protect itself against inflation or make a quick buck or anything like of a sort. And
Uh-huh.
if it happens to silver, even just a little bit, I think it's going to start feeding upon itself. Like silver gets a bit of attention, just a bit of attention, then
Yep.
people start noticing that, hey, supply is limited. Hey, we've had deficits for a number of years. Hey, the price is probably cheap on, historically, from an historical viewpoint. So, if it starts running, I can't see what is going to stop it, what is going to be able to stop it, especially if the banks are no longer able to supply the market and are no longer able to, if they lose control over that mechanism.
Right. And it's a small market too.
Yes, it's a tiny market. If
Yeah,
they lose control over that price suppression mechanism, then it has the potential to do things, to put Bitcoin to shame.
right. Absolutely. And looking back in the past in 1930, when the US imposed tariffs on about 20,000 imported goods, it ended up sparking a trade war. Many countries did retaliate with tariffs of their own, and one of those countries was Canada. Canada imposed tariffs on 16 US products that accounted for about 30% of the US exports to Canada. Now, in this time period back then, the US was on a gold standard, so the price was fixed. But this time we are not. And if a trade war starts and it causes a slowdown in the global economy, that ends up triggering inflation, I could see it affecting the prices of the metals. I mean, does that make sense?
Yes. Well, we don't exactly know what will be the trigger. I just have this, history teaches us that inflation always ends when gold and silver, the price of gold and silver rises to catch up with the money supply. It's true that in prior cases of inflation, we didn't have such a financialized system, economy, and we didn't have Bitcoin as this kind of liquidity sink. But I don't think that fundamentally this has changed. I think that the final destination of all that money printing, all that liquidity which is sloshing around the system, the final destination is always commodities, and particularly gold and silver. I trust history. I trust the historical cases, and I'm quite confident. I'm still quite confident that it's going to happen eventually. The only question is when.
That makes sense. And I feel like they're starting to lose control of gold a little bit. Um,
Yes,
looking
gold
forward,
gold is almost at a new all-time high. And by the way, if you look at a weekly close, in terms of a weekly close, it did set a new all-time high just recently. But it's still extremely undervalued in my view. I still think that, just for it to reach 3,000, which looks like a huge milestone, but by doing so, it will only be setting its foot on the starting line, in the race towards revaluing itself compared to the money supply. Now, just to realize how much liquidity is sloshing around there, just look at the markets. Just look at the way in which the Bitcoin can jump just overnight, or all those meme coins can jump overnight, or
sure.
the stock market, those tech
Hmm.
stocks. Just recently, they had a big down day, but they can just as quickly set new all-time highs because there's so much what we call hot money slushing around there. Yes, it's money that has been printed. It's in the hands of very wealthy individuals who are constantly speculating where they're trying to increase their wealth. They look at it as, you know, casino chips. Unlike you
Right.
and I, who are very careful with our money because we don't have a lot of money,
We
they
can't be
can,
reckless with it. Yeah,
Yeah, they can afford to just put a few millions on some meme coin because they think there's a good chance it's going to pop. And if they lose those millions, so be it.
they'll be all
It
right.
doesn't,
Yeah,
yeah, it doesn't change their personal finance to a huge degree. Like I can't do that. So it's what we call hot money. It's here right now and it can be gone in a few minutes. And this kind of this the amount of liquidity which flows around, it injects so much volatility and craziness into the market that it is evident that it will have to be resolved somehow. And I think the way for it to resolve is by revaluing all the prices of commodities and also the cost of labor. Also, people's salaries will have to rise accordingly. And then when the prices of commodities, the prices of, the stuff you need, of food, of fuel rises, then this is the only thing that can, restrain that speculative fervor because people are going to say, okay, so okay, now my grocery bill is going up tremendously.
hmm,
Yeah, fuel, the price of fuel is going up. Perhaps I shouldn't speculate as much as I'm doing right now. Perhaps I should be a little more conservative with my money. This is what we need to happen. This is what usually happens during times of inflation. We need the prices of commodities to catch up with the expansion of the money supply. This is how inflation ends. This is a good thing. Although it's painful for those who don't own any gold and silver, it's good for the entire economy because it ends that cycle of inflation. Now, we're
that
hoping that
that that
the
that's really interesting. And so, because typically we think of all aspects of a recession as being negative, but in this case, if the metal's corrected, um, you know, and people were having to pay for mistakes that they made during the market boom and they were being too speculative, this could actually be healthy for the economy in a way.
yes, you mentioned the concept of a recession. Well, it's the same thing with a recession. Um, During a recession, we are as though, although we are thinking of a recession as such a negative thing, but as a matter of fact, it's the moment in which we are recognizing the mistakes that have taken place during the boom, and we're starting to correct them.
Hmm.
For instance, if you've invested in a company which has never had any chance of making money, yes,
Sure.
the the only reason that investment seemed plausible or seemed that it has the potential of being profitable, the only reason is because interest rates were very low. There was a huge, it was very easy to get cheap credit, and based on that cheap credit, that investment seemed to be reasonable. But now that there's a lot less credit available, suddenly it turns out that it was a bad investment, and that company needs to go bankrupt. So this is the time during a recession, suddenly you correct all those mistakes that took place during the boom. And I argue that similarly, the rising prices of commodities is the correction of the expansion of the money supply. It's like the other aspect. One is deflationary, the other is inflationary.
That's very insightful. And yeah, when the interest rates were low, it seemed like all the companies were going up. Like everyone seemed like they were doing great. So what are your thoughts on gold and silver going forward? Do you think that we could potentially see a big correction in either metal, in the price going up in the net within the next few years? Or, I mean, if you had to guess.
We could see a temporary decline even in the prices of the metals. I don't think it's justified, but it's just the way the market works. But long term, people should focus on the long term because it's very difficult. It's almost impossible to tell what's going to happen short term. There's so much volatility in the market. And as we get to the final stages of this bubble, this volatility is only going to increase. The only thing that we can say with confidence is that long term, the prices of the metals should rise in order to compensate, in order to account for all the money printing that took place during the past decade. Yeah, it takes many, many years for the market to do this kind of accounting. And it's even more difficult now that we have Bitcoin and other assets who are masquerading as safe haven assets. So instead of having the money flow directly from, let's say, from assets into commodities the way it used to happen, there's like a stop in the middle. It's as though it's like a dam. Yeah, like Bitcoin has
Right.
placed a dam on the river of dollars.
And they
And
go out of their way to convince themselves that it's a safe haven asset. It's really kind of crazy because I think that there's really two times when people are investing in gold and silver. One is if they've made a lot of money off a speculative asset. It's smart, or maybe if they just sold something expensive like a house. But it's smart if you made a bunch of money off crypto, then you take it and park it in gold and silver to protect that wealth. And then there's dollar cost average stackers. But there's this you're right, this idea today that some of these cryptos are almost as good as the precious metals, and it's kind of crazy.
I think it's an illusion. I think if you truly study what is Bitcoin, I'm not talking about its technical aspects, which sometimes can, confuse you. Let go of the technical aspects of Bitcoin, its technology. Think about the essence of it. It's working as a ledger. It's not truly an asset because it has no industrial applications. I mean, like if you can't sell your Bitcoin to someone else, there's nothing else you can do with it,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, you can't construct a solar
No.
panel or electronic circuit with it. So, it's useless on its own. It's only a ledger which allows people who participate in it to say, okay, I've put into this system and now I want to take some energy out of it. But
Right.
that, of course, means that someone else needs to be on the other side
To
of
buy
that
that from you.
transaction
Yep.
and pay you those dollars that you want to take out of that system.
Absolutely. And then they're going to be
Okay.
hoping to resell that to someone else in the future.
So because the price is constantly rising, it gives you this impression as though it can function as money or that it's a good investment. But the true price of Bitcoin only relies on its popularity. If for some reason it loses favor with the public, if for some doesn't matter any reason whatsoever, there
Sure.
is no person in the world who is forced to buy Bitcoin for any reason. Nobody's lives, nobody's industry, nobody's products rely on consuming Bitcoin.
Right. Nobody really has to have it.
They
This is
they only
completely
buy it
optional.
because they want to, not because they have to.
Yes.
And that sounds like a it sounds like a small thing. It isn't. It's a huge, huge thing because gold and silver have that industrial user out there who has to get them no matter what happens. If the price rises, it continues to buy. If the price falls,
They're still
even
buying.
more, even more so. If
Yep.
the price falls, it will step into the market and take advantage of that uh,
That lower price.
decline in the price.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You cut down the cost of the phone you're making or whatever it is you're making.
yeah. As far as the industrial consumer is concerned, that's a good thing if the price falls. So you have this demand, this constant demand that gives a floor to the price, which no crypto asset has, and no crypto asset will ever have. And this is why gold and silver are a lot more stable. The price is stable. The industrial demand tends to stabilize the price, reduce volatility, and also why they have been around for so many thousands of years because this industrial demand will just keeps them going. Also grants legitimacy to using them as monetary assets.
Absolutely. They have a long history that you can trust. Um, Not nearly as much downside potential as cryptos. It's a whole nother animal.
As I was saying earlier, I see Bitcoin and other crypto assets right now acting as some kind of a dam on the, if you think about the flow of dollars in the system as a huge river that emanates somewhere from the Fed and gradually it goes through the stock market and later it travels, it goes down the downstream, it goes to the hands of the people. They put some of it into Bitcoin, then it slows down the flow of liquidity towards their final destination, which is commodities, always has been, always will be. Because eventually we all need to eat and we all need, a roof above our heads. So each and every one of us needs commodities. We all consume
Right.
commodities. And we are all trying to make more money so we can consume more commodities. That's always the final destination of money is to consume, right?
Right.
So it's just if there is an imbalance in the system and you've had a huge increase in the supply of dollars, it it eventually always means that you need to see the prices of commodities rising accordingly for the market to find equilibrium. Now, this is a principle which is, it's everlasting. Doesn't matter the the policy of the Fed or the policy of the federal government. Doesn't matter. This principle will remain, I think, forever.
That makes sense. And I wouldn't surprise me if you're totally right that it does exist forever.
This brings me, there is a crazy idea which is being floated right now by Senator Cynthia Loomis. She's a Republican from Wyoming. And she recommends to revalue the gold in Fort Knox, the gold which is owned by the federal government, and use that money in order for the federal government to establish a national Bitcoin reserve.
Oh man,
Now,
so ridiculous.
like, I think this idea it's asinine on so many levels. I'll try to break it down because there's a lot to unpack there. Well, first of all, we need to mention that currently on the books, uh, the gold, which is owned by the United States, is listed according to the price of about $42 an ounce. That was the price when Nixon took us off the gold standard. And as though by revaluing the price of that gold, recognizing that the market price has risen so much since then, um, the US government can, as though, have like a huge amount of money, this windfall, right?
Right. And so the idea is that they'll take that all of that extra money from that revaluation and park it in Bitcoin. Is that correct?
Now, what they're arguing is that by revaluing the gold, they can have this those windfall profits. They can have this a bunch of money without increasing the debt, and also without selling the gold. This is what they argue, if I understand correctly. But I think that's just, that's just an accounting gimmick. I think there's a sleight of hand there. Because if you do revalue the gold and use that money to do something, that means that you've spent the money. Yes, the money has been
Right.
spent.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
if now just imagine if you had an asset, let's say a house, and you want to use, and its price as though has risen, you want to use that equity, that increased equity, and use it to buy something. Doesn't matter what.
Yeah. Normally you'd be taking out a loan on that equity.
Right. A home equity loan.
Right.
So if the government is spending money based on revaluation of gold, of the price of gold, that means that it's taking on more debt, even though it doesn't look, even if it's not registered as new debt, it is new debt.
That's a good point, and I like the home equity loan example. There's definitely seems like there's some smoke and mirrors going on here.
Definitely, it's confusing. It's a very confusing suggestion, recommendation, because it as though doesn't increase the national debt, but eventually there are new dollars created, or at least new dollars which will be inserted into circulation. Yes,
Yeah, I don't.
who will receive those new dollars? The early adopters of Bitcoin. And there's just a handful of them. There's lots of people who own Bitcoin, but the huge, the big owners of Bitcoin, there's just a handful of them.
That's an interesting
Bitcoin is,
point too. It's going to concentrate the wealth into those people.
yes, it's
That's
as
yeah,
though a huge wealth transfer to the hands of just a handful of early adopters. And that means that each and every person who owns a bit of Bitcoin will see their wealth, or the price of their Bitcoin increase, but this will mainly benefit those a handful of early adopters. So it's going to be incredibly bad for wealth distribution
right.
for wealth gaps in the United States.
Right, absolutely. This isn't going to be evenly distributed at all.
And I also think it's going to be extremely inflationary, because it means it looks as though we haven't increased the debt, but new dollars will be inserted into the system and begin to circulate. Now, will the people receiving those dollars be spending them? We don't know exactly what they're going to do with them. They're certainly going to spend some, right?
Right, absolutely.
So perhaps some of it is going to end up in the stock market, and perhaps some of it is going to end up in gold and silver as well. But I think at least some of it will be used to buy new cars, new houses,
For sure.
bigger, more
Gucci
stakes.
handbags, right,
Yeah,
obnoxious clothing, and gaudy jewelry.
definitely.
So some gold and silver, um,
So,
eventually, I would imagine, at least in the form of jewelry. But I agree with you. I don't see any way that it couldn't be inflationary.
right. So I think it's going to be inflationary. On top of it, I think the US government will not uh, make any profit on its Bitcoin holding. Let me tell you why. Because the moment they announce, of course, the US government can't buy Bitcoin the same as you and I do that. They can't do that clandestinely. They can't be secretive about it. They can't buy it behind the curtains when nobody's looking. The moment they appropriate funds to this project, everybody knows that it has happened. The price of Bitcoin will automatically jump like tenfold. It'll go to $1 million per Bitcoin. And then when they actually go and spend that money, go buy that Bitcoin, they'll get 1/10 perhaps of the Bitcoin that they can potentially get today. And also, once they finish buying that Bitcoin, I suspect that the price will crash back down because it's just a huge liquidity that goes into that market, but it's happening all at the same time. And once it's over, you can only revalue the gold once, right?
Right.
You can't do it again. And I think this is a huge vote of no confidence in the dollar itself. It's as though the federal government is declaring that it itself does not believe in the dollar.
That's too funny. Yeah, that's a good point. They are saying that, whether or not they realize it, that they're definitely
No,
saying
they're
that.
going to tell you, hey, but now the dollar is backed by Bitcoin. But that is not true either. Because backing, what is true backing? Backing means that the dollar is convertible on demand to the asset in
To that asset.
question.
Right.
And also at a fixed exchange rate.
Yes.
And if the dollar was truly backed by Bitcoin, that would be as though you are pegging the price of the value of the dollar to the price of Bitcoin, which is measured by dollars, by the way, which again, this is kind of a circular thing. I
Right.
don't know, my mind is, I'm not smart enough to understand all the ramifications of that. I just want to end by saying
Hmm.
that I don't think it's ever going to happen because I think that the Federal Reserve will intervene and prevent this idea from happening. Because, as though I don't think of the Federal Reserve, the people at the Federal Reserve, as being very wise, but I think they're smart enough to realize that doing that setting up this Bitcoin reserve is a very dangerous proposal, that it's going to kill the dollar.
I hope that you're right about that. We'll just have a look at what's going on with the Shanghai Gold Exchange to kind of start wrapping things up. They are going to be closed from January 28th to February 4th. Um, because the Western banks are heavily manipulated, I'm sorry, because the Western markets are heavily manipulated, it's common to see the price for silver go up when the COMEX is closed, for example, and Shanghai is open. And we will often see the price go down when COMEX is open and Shanghai is closed. Now, gold is close to its all time highs right now. Um, but they're going to have a week at the COMEX to smash the price of the metals if they choose to do that. So we'll just have to see what happens between now and next Tuesday. Um, I just want to say if it goes up over the next week, the paper traders are really starting to lose control of the gold market. But I wouldn't be surprised if we do see it knocked down a little while Shanghai is closed over the next week.
Yes. Well, everything is possible, you know. It's like when the cat is away, the mice will play.
Right? Exactly.
And that's exactly what happens when the Chinese are not present in the market. It's easier to manipulate it down. We've seen that happening many times in the past. Look, I'm asking people not to care too much about the official price of gold and silver. Look, we can't help ourselves. We have to watch the price. We have to look at it. But we don't have to take it too seriously, especially when there's like this, when the manipulation is very blatant. We've had such a display just a couple of days ago. There was a big down day in the markets due to news about this new AI, this new Chinese AI called DeepSeek, and supposedly because they are um, able to construct that AI far more cheaply than any company in the West. These kinds of stories are for me an excuse. They're not the real reason that things are happening. If the market is falling on such news, it's because it wanted to fall and it was looking for an excuse to do that. But what we saw on that day, it was very interesting. Initially, the stock market was falling, Bitcoin was falling, and gold and silver were rising on that news, which is completely counterintuitive. But it should be this way.
So that's a
It
good
means,
sign.
yeah, that was a very good sign. But the moment the comics opened, as though everything got turned on its head, and suddenly the market, the stock market started correcting upwards, and Bitcoin started rising as well. Bitcoin is still correlated to tech stocks, and gold and silver started falling. It's as though some invisible hand comes into the market exactly when New York wakes up
Just happens to be at that time.
and puts everything back in its rightful place.
But yeah,
At least,
from their perspective.
yeah, from their perspective. It's as though they're trying to acquire control, to gain control of the market again. Some people call it a plunge protection team. I don't know. I don't know if such a team actually exists, but just by watching the prices, the price action, you certainly get the feeling that this team actually exists and it goes into action exactly when New York wakes up.
I think that the correlation is too strong for it to be a coincidence, but that's just my opinion. It definitely
Yeah.
seems to happen when the COMEX opens.
Yeah, that's just our opinion. We two conspiracy theorists,
Yes,
crazy conspiracy theorists who we know nothing and we don't understand how the market is working. And it's just we have an active imagination, probably.
yeah, we're just imagining all of this stuff, and of course, we don't have any insider information or anything like that. So just watching what happens and noticing patterns.
Yes, and as I was saying earlier, people, you can watch the price, but don't take it too seriously. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors there, and the true value of gold and silver will only be revealed when this game is over, and it's not over yet. And we have to be strong, and we have to carry on somehow until the very end.
Absolutely. Hang in there. Don't go sell out and buy some meme coins. Of course, that's not financial advice. I should say I'm gonna be that's my goal is to hang in there and not to go sell out to buy some cryptos. But Oren, I'd like to say thank you for your insights. It was great to speak with you today. Everyone, please check out his links in the description. Please don't forget to hit the like button and to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it, and I hope you all have a great day out there.
Thank you for having me, and goodbye to everyone till the next time, till our next discussion.